Brian Armstrong. Net worth, $6.5 billion. Last year, $1 billion. The fortune of the CEO and co-founder of Coinbase more than sextupled over the past year amid the boom in crypto investments. Coinbase has established itself as the dominant U.S. crypto exchange, generating over $1 billion in revenues last year. The firm recently filed to go public.
Yeah, so I mean, there was actually a prototype of what is now Coinbase that I was working on sort of at nights and weekends kind of thing, and it was a basic web wallet. That was all the functionality it had, and so applied with a prototype that was functional and not launched yet. And then during YC, there was 2 or 3 months there where everybody's just working hard, getting their thing ready. Did a soft launch on Hacker News, got a tiny bit of press about it. Maybe another 10 or 15,000 users. Kind of the first group of people really signed up and using it. Mm-hmm. And then it all kind of culminated at the end with demo day and going out and trying to raise some seed investment. Yeah, well, I mean, even at that phase, actually, the team was almost non-existent. So I was really just starting to think about all those things. But yeah, I think, and the people who I reached out to try to form the early version of the team, there was one guy in particular who had a really good security background. And he's actually still working with us as a contractor. He actually lives in Germany. And he released this, we met on GitHub, which is like a really nerdy thing to say, but he actually released this open source library called Bitcoin Ruby. And I remember reading his code and thinking that it was pretty amazing. So I had like kind of this nerd crush on him, whatever. Mm-hmm. And so he started emailing over a period of months and finally got him to do a couple Skype calls and things like that. And now he's come to San Francisco a number of times to hang out with us and everything like that. But he deserves a lot of credit for he's one of these guys where if there's ever some crypto problem or crazy coding edge case, I send it to him in Germany and he sends me back a solution in like 20 minutes. So he was great at helping validate like edge cases and a lot of security like holes and writing really, one of the things we spent a lot of time doing in the early days was writing a really massive test suite for all the code. So even to this day, we have over 200 tests that run against the code before every deploy. And he and I were sort of like really intense about testing every possible edge case. And I think that helped the security and the reliability of the site a lot. Yeah, I mean, so I think one of the most important things we've done is we made a decision early on to keep the vast majority of customer funds actually entirely offline. And so there was, well, let me take a step back further. So there was sort of two, I think, approaches we could have gone with this. One would have been to kind of push the responsibility of security to the user. And that is a valid approach, I think, for technical users. They might be a little bit more comfortable with that.
You mean storing the keys to access that locally? Yeah,
so for example, we could only store encrypted data and put the responsibility of, say, the password or anything like that on the customer. And that's a valid approach, but I think if you were to go to somebody like my mother and say, well, here's your online banking, and by the way, if you forget your password, all your money is gone in your bank account. Mm-hmm. That's not really a good way to start a relationship with a mass market audience, right?
Sure.
So we sort of identified that was missing in the Bitcoin ecosystem was this a mass market, easy to use product, and part of that is security, right? And so we made a decision where we said, we're actually going to try to provide security as a service to customers instead of pushing the responsibility onto them to do it themselves. And so that became basically providing secure Bitcoin storage as a service. And one of the key aspects of that we do is, we actually take the majority of funds completely offline, disconnect it from the internet. We do something called key splitting, which is where you use redundancy and you only need, say, 3 of the 5 parts. The numbers could be anything. It could be 5 of 10 or 2 of 3 or whatever. But you split the keys with redundancy, and we actually distribute them geographically all over the world, so that each of the pieces is, in a safe deposit box somewhere geographically. But
so what unlocks those keys? So you're saying you pull the key together in order to access the funds?
Right. You can imagine like nuclear launch codes. You need like 2 of the keys to turn at the same time, and if the vice president has been incapacitated, there's somebody else who has a key, right? So it requires consensus, and also there's redundancy. So if any individual piece is lost, the total key is not lost. Even multiple pieces can be destroyed or lost in various ways. So that's a really important part of what we have today. Just to take it one step further, and there's a lot of things we can't we're not really ready to announce yet or anything like that, but I think there's actually a way we can get the best of both worlds. So it's not like a binary thing, like 100% responsibility of the customer, 100% responsibility of Coinbase.
Right.
I think there's actually some really cool ways we can share the responsibility and provide some services that people really want around, like leaving Bitcoin in their will and things like that, where if they really do disappear, like their heirs can recreate the key and with one piece stored with Coinbase or something like that. But in any given day-to-day scenario, it's not like they're trusting us with the full amount of the data.
Right.
So I'm kind of hinting at one idea that we could do in the future, and there's a few others which we're not really ready to announce. But you can imagine that I personally think that's the way that the services are going to end up going in Bitcoin.
Do you think there's ever going to be like an FDIC kind of based insurance that will back and support, like use some type of stamp you'll be able to put on your website and say, like, if we get hacked, you're insured up to $100,000?
Yeah. I don't think it'll be FDIC like government backed, but I do think those things can come out of the private insurance market.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's actually a hot wallet that's on the site with a small amount of funds. Let's say it's 5% of customer funds. And in any given, most users on the site don't control more than 5% of all deposits on Coinbase. And so with the day-to-day kind of activity that's going around the site, you don't need to keep all the funds. You can just have, say, 5% of funds on the server, and that's servicing all the normal day-to-day flow. And
does that spike when there's like, let's say there's some kind of crazy crash happening right now and everyone's like, I want to get out?
Yeah.
Do you have to then bump that reserve up to like 15%?
Exactly. So that's actually the one situation that is most common when you would actually need to restore keys from offline. So it's in the situation where there'd be a price drop and a lot of people want to sell at the same time. And I think in the last year and a half or so, we've only needed to restore offline keys maybe a handful of times, a couple. And that's,
is that automated?
No, I mean it's like
you have to physically go in and plug in a server or something to like bring it from offline on, or?
We have to collect keys geographically from, and it's designed in a way where it can be done in a matter of hours. It's not an emergency, but that is a key component of the system. There's always this trade-off, right? Like you could make it much harder to collect the keys and have increased security, but it would increase the amount of time it would take to restore them, right? So there's always this balance you're making.
How do you go and do that then? Let's say there is a crash that's happening like right now, and all of a sudden you're like, shit, well I need to go from 5% reserves to 15%, but it's going to take a couple hours to get there, but people want to get their funds out. Like, it's kind of like run on the bank. Like how do you ensure that you're not have pickers saying, I can't transfer my funds out, this sucks? Like,
well, I mean, it's slightly different than the run on the bank since all the funds are there. There's no reserve ratio or anything like that. And we made it an explicit goal of the site that in the event of a price sell-off or something like that, you're always able to sell and lock in the price. And we have essentially all these alerts that go off as reserves start to go below certain thresholds.
So to rally the troops at some point because you're getting notifications. Yeah,
and we get there's like backups and there's text message even if it's in the middle of the night and everyone's asleep in San Francisco. There's a hierarchy of people who will start getting phone calls and woken up to restore keys and things like that. So it's true that we're not an exchange in the traditional sense of the word. We don't have an order book with bids and asks and everything like that. The analogy is kind of a little bit closer to, let's say, New York Stock Exchange, and we're kind of more like a Fidelity or Schwab or somebody like that in this new ecosystem. It's a loose analogy, right? So we're trying to provide the easy consumer interface to an exchange, which we view as more of like a professional trader tool or B2B type service. But we don't really disclose too many details about how we work on the back end, just because it opens up some potential for abuse. But needless to say, we collect pricing data from a variety of sources. We offset. We have a lot of flow that happens internally, and And it's basically, there's a lot of work that's gone into pricing our risk in that scenario. So whenever we're issuing quotes, we feel very confident that we can actually source at those prices. And this is something my co-founder actually spent a lot of time working on, since he was an FX trader at Goldman Sachs before this and studied computer science. And he actually built out a pretty sophisticated backend to manage this entire process. So.
Do you, you charge fees to do these transactions.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever make money on like that float between users when they're trying to sell and buy between each other?
So we charge 1% when people buy or sell.
Right, but what about like the opportunity to arbitrage, like the price, like on the exchanges versus what you have on your site?
Oh, I see. No, we've made it actually an explicit goal of the business to try not to, have like an algorithmic trading, profit center at this point. We actually are putting our best guess at what we can source it at, and we put 1% on top of it. Mm-hmm. So,
have you lost money there in the past, like where you didn't guess right? And
sure. You're never actually
in flux so much.
Yeah. It's really, we're quoting someone the price based on our current available data set. And even if they click the button, 2 seconds later, and we go out and we try to source it, that data has changed in some way. Mm-hmm. So the goal is not to get it right on every trade. It's at the end of the month when we average, did we get about 1%? And that's our target.
I see.
Yeah. We've experienced some pretty dramatic growth in the last year. And there are certain points where we are receiving so many buy orders that during a ramp up or something like that, that we reach a point where we don't feel comfortable we can continue to source coins at the prices that we're quoting. And so our only alternative at that point is to put some price that's way off the charts, which is not fair to our customers, or to essentially pause buys. Or one thing we do is we say you can still buy, but you'll get the price when your funds arrive in 4 days. It's better than turning it off completely, but obviously not as good as people getting an exact quote of what price they'll get. Mm-hmm. The growth has been really staggering. So I think in January we might have done $1 million of buys and sells the whole month, and we were probably doing 15 million within a few months of that, and we're not disclosing exact numbers at this point, but needless to say, we're talking orders of magnitude above that. And I don't know what to say. We're not able to service all the demand sometimes. And when we see the price go up or the price go down, we see increases in people buying and selling. But I think that's fine. There's this speculation that's happening right now, and that's people's focus on the price. And in a way, it's good because it's actually bringing awareness to tons of people who've never heard about Bitcoin, and lots of people who would never have Bitcoin end up with a little bit in their wallet. Obviously, we don't think that's the long-term potential of it. The more interesting long-term potential is around it being a payment network. And so this is a bootstrapping mechanism, if you will, that was built into Bitcoin, I think, by design. To encourage a lot of people in the early days to buy some and have a little bit. And so once the consumer, wallet side reaches some critical mass, you now have the necessary components for a real payment network to start to happen. I think it's going to make a lot of sense for the industry to kind of come to some consensus on that, and probably it's going to be almost like Y2K, right? It's like everybody will pick a date, and the majority of people out there will all kind of switch over right on that date. So
have you thought about doing it?
Yeah, I think it's going to have to happen just from a pure usability point of view. So it's funny, there's a couple of proposals in the community right now. There's like going to MBTC. Some people want to go all the way to like micro BTC.
Which is even one more step over, right?
Yeah.
2 more, right?
So you can either go 3 digits, 3, or you could go all the way to 6.
Right.
Or you could go all the way to 8, So anyway, there's all these proposals people were talking about.
Where are you at? Where does your head stand on that right now? Are you a fan of MBTC? Or?
I want the community to come to consensus, and I think we trust their judgment. I think doing something like moving 3 to millibitcoin, and then 3 more to micro in a few years, something like that seems like it probably would make sense. But
given that you're such a big player right now, obviously the biggest online wallet, it feels like if you made the move, like you would force a lot of others to do that. Like, do you feel like you're going to sit back and wait for it to mature another 6 months, or like at what point do you decide internally, say, hey everyone, like we're changing the code, we're going to do this? Like, what kind of consensus has to happen for you to do that?
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to be viewed as like pushing anything on the Bitcoin community. We're here to service the Bitcoin community and make it easier to use. So I think there's a lot of people that would be better equipped to make that decision, whether it's the open source contributors, the miners, the Bitcoin Foundation.
So like when some of the clients start to switch, like let's say the official Bitcoin client makes the switch, then you'd be like, okay, now it's probably...
Yeah, and of course, Gavin Andreessen is an advisor on our board now, which we announced a couple weeks ago, and so we're in contact with him about these sort of things, and occasionally he asks for our opinion. Often we ask for his opinion on things, so we look to people like that to kind of offer guidance, but we're happy to kind of support once something looks like it's about to happen. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think you'll actually see pretty good adoption of Bitcoin by merchants this year.
What's going to get people there? Just like the buzz? Is it going to be...
Well, we're sort of right on the cusp of this critical mass on the consumer side. So it again comes back to this idea. We think of it as like phase one of Bitcoin was, and still is, largely about speculation and people buying it as an investment, and it's the consumer side just growing like gangbusters, mm-hmm. right? We're just seeing the beginnings of merchant adoption, I think, and you have this chicken egg problem with any network, right? You need consumers and merchants who want to both use Bitcoin, and the way you solve any chicken egg problem is you have to have one side of the market have a clear benefit when the other side is not there. Mm-hmm. So Bitcoin has this solved, I believe by design or a bit of luck, I'm not sure. Where the price of Bitcoin was designed to go up over time, and it's been volatile, and so people are trading on it, becoming aware of it, and the consumer side is reaching critical mass, and that's a prerequisite. So I think we're just now getting to like a large number of consumers in the U.S. who have it. I think in Coinbase we have roughly 650,000 consumer wallets. We're growing 31% month over month, so those are all good figures, which indicate adoption is happening very rapidly. And so merchants now are just starting to get excited about it. And the benefits to them are clear if they believe that people are actually going to pay with Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Of course, they see low fees, no chargebacks, and it works internationally. And there's certain categories of merchants where they're actually in a huge amount of pain, their business is, due to some of these problems. And so a lot of the interest that we have from merchants now that we're talking with, and I wish I could share with you some of the ones that are in our business development pipeline, because mm-hmm. they're pretty incredible.
Like bigger players, you mean?
Yeah. So I think you'll see some of those announced in 2014.
Cool.
Yeah, so it'll be exciting. There's an interesting psychological effect that happens when you have an asset that is appreciated a lot, which is that you don't mind spending little pieces of it to capture the upside. So I've noticed this with myself and my own Bitcoin that I have. So, I bought some Bitcoin when it was really cheap, and over the years have, bought a little bit more. And it's appreciated. And so when people ask me for Bitcoin, I don't mind giving them $5 of Bitcoin, or we pay each other in the office, or, we've bought some things online using Bitcoin. And I'm not going to sell, 20% or 50% or 75% of my Bitcoin, but I don't mind spending small bits of it because it feels a little bit like free money to me. It's like I've captured all this upside from the appreciation. Mm-hmm. So that's one aspect. Another is that, there's this interesting thing with Moore's law and computers, right? So, computers get more powerful at the same price, every year, every 18 months. And so you could make an argument, well, why would you ever buy a computer? Because you would just delay, because
right.
a way better model is going to come out in 18 months, right? And of course, people still buy a ton of computers, and the reason is that there's a cost to deferring some things you want to buy. Mm-hmm. And that's also true for food, housing, transportation. If you want to take a trip or get married, you can't just defer all expenses forever. And so that's another argument for why, if you have Bitcoin and it's going up in value and it's some percentage of your net worth, you're still going to spend with it.
What are your feelings on Litecoin?
I mean, Litecoin's great. And of course, we hired the creator of Litecoin, Charlie Lee.
He's working for you now, right?
Yeah. So
how much time does he spend on Litecoin? He's got to be freaking out because Litecoin's at, $30 a coin or whatever, USD a coin. And is he still spending time working on that part-time?
Well, there's a number of people who contribute to the open source Litecoin project. Mm-hmm. So he's a bit of an arbiter or something like that at this point. He's not writing a ton of code for it. But yeah, I mean, so Litecoin has similar properties to Bitcoin in terms of how it appreciates, the scarcity of it, and all that sort of thing. So I don't think there's a good argument for why it should be used for day-to-day purchases or anything like that instead of Bitcoin, but it does kind of make sense there's a number two in the market, right? I mean,
yeah, it feels like in any market, there's always going to be competition, and that's always a healthy thing. And do you feel like there's other cryptocurrencies? Like, I'm obviously, in looking at the list, there's lists online of all these cryptocurrencies. There's 100 plus or whatever at this point. A lot of them are direct clones. A lot of them have been pre-mined. There's a lot of scams out there. There's some interesting ones, I believe personally, in like a Purecoin or a Primecoin that actually have moved from proof of work to proof of stake, and looking for prime numbers. Like, do any of these catch your attention as like ones that you would potentially integrate into Coinbase?
Not yet, but that doesn't mean it's never going to happen, right? I think we're watching the space really closely, and I like to read about all these new altcoins that are coming out as well.
Are there any that you like that you kind of keep tabs on?
No, I mean, there's not one that's gotten me as excited about Bitcoin. I think, and that's not to say it'll never happen, but there's not one yet that has really, captured my attention too much. Litecoin, you having the head developer working with you, is he like, come on, dude, let's integrate this into the site, let's get this going? Is he pushing to try and like have that be the second cryptocurrency that you guys offer? I mean, we've talked about it a lot, obviously. I think he's a realist about it, though. I think, we have all these, there's trade-offs to it, right? It adds complexity to the site.
Confusion to the end user, which one do I buy?
It sort of begs the question, what are the different use cases of it? Why is one better than the other? So, I don't know, Litecoin is, I think it's sort of like Coke, Pepsi, and there's this power law distribution of, a lot of other little ones. Or, there's like Facebook, and there's probably there's Google Plus, and there's some social network in Russia or whatever. Sure. It's sort of like this power law distribution. So, I think Bitcoin is not going to be supplanted or displaced. It'll always be the largest cryptocurrency there. But I like the fact that there are alternatives there that offer slightly different things to different people who want them.
Mm-hmm. Next year, wrapping things up, because I don't want to take too much of your time, because I'm sure your site's on fire right now, like all the users. Remember last time I told you were barely sleeping because of how much craziness was going on.
Yeah.
Next 12 months, next year, I mean, we're almost at 2014. What does it look like for you, feature-wise? Like, how big does your team get? You just announced congratulations on a huge round of funding.
Yeah.
How do you spend that money, and what does the product look like over the next 12 months?
Yeah, so I think the first thing we're going to work on doing is building out the team. We're still a surprisingly small team with only 8 full-time people and a number of contractors, probably about a dozen contractors around the world. And so the first thing we want to do, Bitcoin is probably the most interesting computer science problem, I think, out there in the world right now. It's probably not a stretch to say that. And we really need to continue building this world-class team of engineers and product people that we have so far to take that to the next level. So that's the first thing. I think also we're largely based in the US today with the options that we have for people to use Coinbase. Mm-hmm. And Bitcoin is an inherently international thing. So I think, in our mission to make Bitcoin easy to use and all these sort of things, it's really important to make that accessible to a global audience.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you could open in other markets locally.
I mean, it's certainly something we're interested in, right? And I think we would be remiss to not help Bitcoin have a global audience, right? There's other things that we can spend it on too. Like, for example, we have a great kind of customer acquisition strategy right now around giving away free Bitcoin. So we actually have it set up right now. We took a page out of PayPal's book here, where when you refer a friend and they get $5 worth of Bitcoin, you get $5 worth of Bitcoin. So it's a double-sided referral program, and that's been scaling really well. And we're kind of going to double down on that and help get Bitcoin in the hands of a whole bunch of new people.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.